So we'll call the meeting to order, and we'll start with any public comment. Is there anybody, Ryan, or are you managing that? Okay. So we don't have anybody lined up for public comment, and there's nobody here in the room for public comment, so we'll move on to approval of the minutes from the June 10th, 2021 quarterly meeting. Is there a motion there?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the June 10th, 2021 meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to executive, administrative, and financial.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The materials are in the third tab, I guess, well, when we had tabs. But let me start with just an update on commission membership. As I mentioned yesterday during our meeting, notices were sent to the appointing authorities about upcoming terminate or ends of terms, and we have received to date six appointments. So Representative Stevens, DA Sunday, Judge Daly, Judge Tucker, Professor Rago, and Judge Marsico. So I will be sending reminder letters to the appointing authorities, and members serve until replaced. So we're good to go for moving into our next meeting, our December meetings. Regarding ex officio agency reports, I believe we have representatives from the DOC or the parole board with us, so I'm not sure if either of them have any comments they wish to make. I'll just take a break to see if they wish to be recognized and make any statements or provide updates. All right. Hearing none, then let me move on to my report. I want to talk a little bit about commission staff. Yesterday we reviewed the staff complement and the units and so forth. But today I'm happy to announce that two of the members of the commission staff have been working with the commission for 25 years. So we've asked Kathy Dittman and Bob Prost to join us online so that they can be recognized for their service.
So we're having some technical difficulties. Maybe we could come back to that.
Okay. Okay. You let us know.
Wait, hold on. Did she get promoted? We can start with that.
Okay. All right. So, Kathy, we have this wonderful statue of Lady Commonwealth, who is she is perched atop the Pennsylvania State Capitol, and Mark has obtained a replica model, whatever she is here.
Sure.
For you. But we certainly appreciate your outstanding work and your outstanding service. You know, I just know personally, you know, the work that you've done, and I've had an opportunity to work with you over the years, and your work has always been terrific, and your contributions here are just innumerable. So thank you for your commitment and dedication to the Commission and the Commonwealth as a whole. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Chairman Stevens. May I just say a few words?
Of course.
Okay, just that I am the one who's grateful to work with commission members and commission staff, and it's been my honor and privilege to work with previous and current commission members and previous and current commission staff. So I just would like to express my loyalty to, my appreciation of, and my admiration for this commission and for commission staff. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, moving on to Bob, right?
Yeah.
We do not have them online yet.
Oh, you don't?
So,
okay.
So we're trying to get them online now.
All right. Well, let's give it just a minute, see if you have it, and if not, we'll
come back to you.
Okay, we'll come back to you. I know, I see Danielle is on, so that's
Yeah.
great. But okay, we'll come back to you in a couple minutes. No problem. I do want to next mention that Brett Miller, who has been with our research and data analysis staff for a number of years, has been recently promoted to manager of the unit. We're really happy to have Brett in that position. He's done incredible work over the years, a lot of work recently on things like the population projection simulation model and parole guidelines. Really took the lead on a lot of that. So we're lucky to have Brett, and we're really happy that he was promoted to manager. So thank you and congratulations, Brett. We have a number of new hires, and so I'm going to ask the managers of the various units to introduce any of the new members. So we'll start with Brett.
Yeah, so Chris wasn't able to be with us this morning, but we've hired a new data analyst, Chris Marini. He's been with us since July. I think he actually came into the office to work for the first time earlier this week. So he's sort of getting the initiation, working remotely here for the first couple of months, but still, despite those challenges, he's done a great job. In fact, he helped with a lot of the analysis that Matt has been sharing over the last couple of days. So, happy to have Chris with us.
Great, thanks, Brett. Christy?
I'm just going to move on because
Please do.
it'll be a little harder to hear.
Yep.
So we have two people that we added to the applications and IT staff. We have Tim Wilson, who's showing up at the bottom of the screen there. He joined us in early July as a business systems analyst. He has probably over 20 years of experience doing design and development of software systems. He's worked at Raytheon, FCRI International, and Penn State, and he recently was at Avail Technologies as a systems engineer, deploying their product to transit agencies across Pennsylvania. So for us, he's going to be doing business systems analysis, so kind of figuring out requirements for what needs to change in Sgs Web, and then also testing to make sure that we've implemented those things correctly. Sean Michael, is he on there? He's the fourth one down. Sean Michael also, he just started with us September 1st, so just a little over a week ago. He is going to be a programmer analyst. He also comes from Avail Technologies, so we're stealing all of their people, where he was a systems deployment lead. So he was responsible for configuring the system for their customers and testing and deploying their systems to customers across the U.S. So for us, he's going to be doing programming. That's a little newer to him. He's done a little bit, did some of that for Avail, but he really wants to work on those skills. So he's going to be implementing new features and changing things in Sgs Web. Excited to have them both on board, and I'm sure they're going to do great things.
Great. Thanks, Christy. Ryan?
Good morning. The last time, good afternoon. No, we're still working. The last time we were here, we were talking about a vacancy because Jess Rembold left the commission and went to a contracting agency that works with JNet. We are fortunate to have filled that vacancy in a rather timely fashion, and so I'm happy to announce, I believe Maria Agello is with us, and she could turn on her camera. She might actually get the chance to see it. Oh, there she is. Maria. You can turn around. Good morning, Maria. Maria comes to the commission from Luzerne County Probation Department. She will be starting with us on September 24th, so not quite yet, but she was gracious enough to join for the meeting today to get up to speed. Just some brief background. Maria's worked in probation for about 17 years. She's currently the Director of Probation Services in Luzerne County, and concurrently also the Chief of Adult Probation in Luzerne County. They have chiefs for both adult and juvenile. She comes with obviously a lot of experience. Prior to those positions, she handled PSIs in the unit, which is an important task, and also, gets to the experience with Sgs Web and the application of the guidelines. So with that being said, just again, thanks for joining us, Maria, both today and on September 24th, and we're happy to have her with us.
Great. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks.
How are we doing on Bob? Any progress there?
He's getting an error when he tries to log in. That's supposed to remove them from the meeting, even though we didn't do that.
Okay.
So
Well, you keep working away at that and flag me down if you make any progress, because we do want to recognize Bob if we can. So next are, we've talked about several new hires, but we do have some vacancies. I mean, partly because we promoted from within, so that creates some vacancies and so forth. So we presently have 3 vacancies. 2 of them are data analysts working within Brett's unit. Those are posted positions. It looks like we're ready to move forward very soon on interviews. So hope to fill those by the time we have our next meeting. And then we also have an education outreach specialist position. And as I discussed yesterday, the real focus of that position is really on communications, media, that type of thing, helping us to sort of up our game in that area, working with the communications plan, other things like that. So we are in the process. The position, I believe, is posted. We have some candidates from earlier interviews, and we'll take a final look at any other candidates and then start moving on that. So I hope to fill that in the very near future. So I'm really happy about that. If anyone knows of any data analysts out there looking to work for the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing, we have some positions, so send them our way. Apply through Penn State. We're looking forward to filling those positions soon. So with that, let me move to a couple of other items for management and oversight. Just a brief update on the COVID-19 response. The commission staff has been moving towards return to work. We do have some certain staff members that work solely remotely, and that's been working very well because of the technology and the type of work they're doing. In fact, at times we think we're probably more productive in some of those spaces than we were previously. It also, I think, just provides a good balance for those employees, so we're really happy we can accommodate that. It's clearly a win-win right now in those cases. And we have a handful of staff that are back in the office, either here or in the Harrisburg office, and so we're happy to see that. We've gone through all the protocols here at Penn State, and so that's working well. I want to thank Jadine for all of her work in preparing the space and following all the protocols to not only get staff back to work, but to allow us to have this meeting here, and for arranging for us to get these beautiful masks that everyone has, because we're a masking facility right now. So we're real happy that we're able to do that. And we do have a number of staff that are on a hybrid status, so they're working at home 2 or 3 days a week and in the office, the balance. So that has been working pretty well. We expect to keep moving forward with some type of hybrid meeting arrangement so that we will have an opportunity for people to physically meet in person during our upcoming meetings, but also take full advantage of Zoom webinar and live streaming and all the other technology to allow broader access and participation in the meeting. So hope to continue that moving forward. Just a quick note on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've taken a lot of steps during the posting and hiring process to really work at and trying to promote a broader pool of candidates so that we can address diversity issues in staffing. I think that the pool we have for the education outreach and specialist position includes candidates that we're really excited about, and we're hoping to move forward. So we have a lot of work to do on that, but I just wanted to make sure you were aware that we take that seriously, and we're looking for every opportunity to expand the diversity of our staff. And as you know, we have had some efforts over the last year to really develop relationships with our 2 historically Black colleges and universities, Lincoln University and Cheyney University. And so faculty from both of those institutions participated in our academic review panel, and I'll be meeting with faculty members from those 2 schools in the near future as we discuss opportunities for things like internships or co-teaching or other kind of things like that. So I'm thankful to the commission members that really helped us to make those connections. And I want to especially recognize Judge Tucker for his assistance in chairing the academic review panel, but also helping to be available as we're trying to meet with these faculty members to talk about other opportunities. So thank you all for that. And then the final thing that I have is just a report on some of the fiscal issues. We talked about this in a little bit of detail yesterday, so I'm not going to repeat that, except to say that because of COVID and changes in operations linked to that, we've been able to save some funds and put those in reserve. So we're in a pretty good starting point for, at least fiscally, for the commission. Our reserves are where they should be. Our partnership reserves are where they should be. So we're really pleased about that. We're working under our full appropriation at this point, so that's $2.5 million. And we do anticipate that we'll be receiving $400,000 in JRI-2 funds. There's still a little hiccup in getting that money in our account, but the DOC has certified that there were the savings that would justify the $400,000. And there just has to be an arrangement between the department and the governor's budget office for that transfer to occur for us. But we're confident it will happen, and that's part of our plan to rebuild Sgs Web and to do some of the other jobs that we have under the JRI-2 legislation. So we ended last year with a little bit of a surplus. We put that in reserves. The first action item is just to formally close out the end-of-year report or end-of-year budget, and then for us to notify our auditors to begin the audit. As you recall, last year, the commission approved a 3-year audit cycle. So we contracted with an auditor for 3 years of audits. And so last year was the first year. So all we have to do is once we close out the budget, we notify the auditors and they begin the audit process. So we just need a motion to close out the fiscal year 2021 budget and for us to notify the auditors.
I so move.
Senator Street, is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, Attorney Marsico, thank you. It's been moved and seconded to close out the budget and notify the auditors. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Great, thank you. And then we have in your information the details on the operating budget. At this point, we hope as we transition to back to work, the expenses will sort of be going back to clearly where they were, but I think we'll still have some cost savings. So there is the sort of hybrid approach of saving us a bit of money, but we'll be coming back to you with any adjustments in the budget as we move forward. Okay, and so perfect timing, by the way. Appreciate all of your work on this. I'm going to turn it back to the chairman for recognition of Bob Prost for 25 years of service and for his upcoming retirement from the commission.
So Bob, we just really want to say thank you. Thank you so much for your years of service and dedication, both to the commission and the Commonwealth. Mark was describing for us the many roles that you've fulfilled over the years and the contributions that you've made, and we really appreciate your steadfast commitment and dedication. As a token of our appreciation, Mark is, no, that one's Kathy's though.
Oh, well. Just don't read the label.
Yeah, right.
Okay, there we go.
Mark has acquired a model of Lady Commonwealth who sits atop the Pennsylvania Capitol, and it's inscribed with a notation commemorating your years of service. So thanks again for your commitment and all your hard work, and Godspeed on a happy and healthy retirement.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Bob, Mr. Chairman, Bob wrote a few words and he asked me to read them, if I may.
Great, thank you. Sure.
Hello, everyone. I have truly valued working at the Commission since September 25th, 1995, with my position as Research Data Processor 2. I appreciate all the amazing opportunities the Commission provided to me. I wish the Commission and all Commission staff much success in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you. And now I'm going to turn it to Matt for the Deputy Director's report.
Great, thanks, Mark. Just a brief update on our research partnerships. we continue to engage with 2 postdocs this full academic year and 2 graduate students who are working with the commission. We also, and some of this comes out of the academic review panel, that we've developed some additional relationships Mark's mentioned between Lincoln and Cheney University. We have an ongoing project where we're looking at juvenile adjudications with a professor at Penn State University. We have some work with a professor who is also on the academic review panel at the University of Pittsburgh, looking at juveniles who are sentenced as adults. And we also are engaging with professors at Carnegie Mellon University who are going to be assisting us with our review and thinking about prior record score. And there's a lot of other opportunities, and Brett can mention a few of those when he goes through the specific projects, but specifically engaging with additional faculty as we fully evaluate the risk assessment tool, and especially as it relates to racial and ethnic fairness in the application of that tool, as well as specific evaluations of different programs around the Commonwealth. The second piece is just briefly to talk about our continued efforts to improve the website and our communication efforts. As Mark mentioned, we are actively seeking an individual to work in that space, but we've taken great strides, I think, over the last 2 years, specifically in Ryan's unit, the Education and Outreach Group, of developing a number of different tools, be it newsletters, videos, and trainings, and recording of these webinars and making those available in our current web space. And a direct extension of that is to finalize the development of this website that you've probably been hearing me talk about for the last 2 or 3 years, and probably before me as well. So a number of us have been working really closely with the Liberal Arts Information Technology Group, who is taking our concepts and translating them into practice. So first, just as a reminder to look at what our current website looks like.
Last week.
So clearly, it needed a little updating from just a refresh to make it more in line with what modern websites look like. I think that as these websites exist, and one of the things that we're going to spend a lot of time focusing on with the current website is making sure that our website doesn't erode or degrade in quality. You just start posting different things in different areas without like a holistic sense of what the page looks like. So one of the features that we hope to avoid was we have links on the left side that are navigation links. We have links in the middle that are navigation links. We just wanted a more user-friendly, focused approach that's more accessible and easier for the user to find different documents. And one of the nice things of the review, and Mark spent a lot of time working with staff as well, is just thinking about what the overall design should look like and where documents should be stored that makes sense from a commission perspective as well as from a user perspective. Okay, Christy, if you can.
You want to dig down or no?
No, just we'll go to that.
Okay.
Yeah, enough of this.
All right, so as you remember, we worked with a visual display expert on developing updated versions of not only our PowerPoint slides and branding, but some of that materials that we're utilizing for this space. So you can see it's a lot cleaner with the news and events on the side. We want to be able to promote upcoming elements. On this landing page, we have a commission calendar where we'll also be having dates and specific meetings. So we want to just make this a lot cleaner and usable for the user. So if you scroll back up, Christy, and our headers are now cleanly laid out at the top where we have things like policy administration, guidelines, and statutes. So if we could go to policy administration first. So when you come to each of the individual pages now, again, a lot cleaner, a lot easier to use and to navigate. We're going to be using these thumbnail sketches on the far side for certain information that is featuring newer things, be it research, in this case, the annual report. That's very accessible. So if you clicked on that, it would bring you to the annual report. And so we're going to utilize that space again to promote In Ryan's unit, as an example, we'll have the newsletters, the most recent ones there, and of course, all the historical information. So if we go to commission meetings now, just give you a sense of how the page works a little bit in practice. So if we were to take a look and we were interested in June 2021, this now opens like a accordion, and you can see we have the PowerPoint, I'm sorry, the YouTube video recordings, and then we have a number of documents, and each document has that symbol of the square with that there's a terminal document. So if we click on the meeting agenda as an example, you'll end up with a document that can be downloaded as a PDF. And through this review, we haven't counted, but there are thousands and thousands of documents and thousands of pages, but we're organizing it now in a much simpler design here. So again, if you just scroll down, Christy, we would organize these by month. We're thinking we would do something very similar for guideline additions in terms of being able to expand out. So that's one feature. And the last page I'll just show you, because and each page is a similar vein as the education and outreach page. So we have on the right a simple button for guidelines assistance. Again, the idea being super user friendly. Our monthly updates, which are our newsletters, are prominently displayed. Underneath that, we have really an archival type of feature for many of these. We want to promote the most recent material, but certainly make everything accessible and transparent. So if we were to click on, let's say, educational videos as an example. Again, they're just organized in a way that are much more readable and accessible, with the termination of these are the endpoint with the symbol for the YouTube, letting the user know those are videos. Of course, it's called educational videos, but spending a lot of time structuring this in a way that makes sense. And so to give you an update on status, we're probably 98% done with the folks. We just got a note actually while this morning saying they hope to finish by Friday. And there's still additional materials that staff will have to add to this, historical archival materials. But I think for the most part, I know I promised, July and March, and don't make a promise, but in the coming weeks or month, we should be able to go live. And we do have a little bit of a incentive, which is the server that our current site lives on, the university is trying to get rid of. So this became a priority for them to expedite this. But I do want to thank the folks at the university who have been really amazing in assisting us essentially for free through our MOU, but providing us with many of these features and working quite a bit with us on organizational design, but also what features might be good from a user perspective, and then doing all the work of appending these thousands of PDFs. So that's it for my formal one, but any questions or comments?
It's really nice.
Nice. I think it's great.
Yeah, great.
Okay, last comment is, and I don't know the technical term, but it will be able to be used on the iPad. It will like scale. It can be used on a mobile device, something responsive. What's it called? Responsive design, I think it's called. All right, I'm new to this terrain, but I think that's a nice feature that will be an extension from our current page, which wasn't designed with that in mind when it was created years ago.
Thanks.
All right.
Anything else, Matt?
Nope.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
All right, so moving on now to application. So
Yep.
Application and information technology section. Christy?
Move up front again.
Sure.
Sure.
Make sure I have enough laptops here. We're gonna start the video here.
Well, that is for your safe space, right?
Yeah, I see the screens in front of me. That is one thing I like about Zoom. I can just kind of read through my notes and so that's what I'm doing. All right, well, good morning, everybody. I don't have a lot to update on, so this should be relatively brief. I am happy to report that last Thursday, we had a pretty significant update to Sgs Web that we've been working on probably since the beginning of the year or even late last year. We deployed functionality related to the probation guidelines, which were part of Amendment 6, which you all know. So now in Sgs Web, whenever we display sentencing guideline recommendations, we display that P1 or P2, whichever one's applicable, to the recommended duration for the term of probation. We also require users to provide a reason if the sentence doesn't conform to the probation guidelines, or if the aggregate sentence doesn't conform to the recommendations for the aggregate term of probation for the judicial proceeding. We also deployed a change for mandatory probation for certain sexual offenders. We weren't quite handling that right in Sgs Web, so we made a fix for that. So we're now alerting users when that mandatory period of probation applies, and we ask the users if the court ordered the probation or not. I think we're finally finished with changes for Act 115. So after Act 115 was passed, we made a whole bunch of modifications to Sgs Web to support like probation with restrictive conditions and eliminate SIP, among other things. So with the changes we just deployed last week, we're now providing information about eligibility for short sentence parole, and also indicating when state reentry supervision is applicable. And lastly, the other big change we made was to modify Sgs Web to use the new JNet court case event request reply web service, which really means nothing to you guys. The users won't see anything. There's a pretty big deal on the back end for how that works. So I just want to take the time to acknowledge the hard work that my team put into this release and thank them for their efforts. There was a whole bunch of details and moving parts to this, and they did a really good job managing it all. And also thank Ryan's team, because without their input and feedback, I don't think we could do this, or at least not do it as well. You're welcome. I don't know how you guys talk this long with them, totally sit up and down.
An art form.
So while we're still maintaining the current version of Sgs Web, we're starting to turn our focus to the next gen project, or the rebuild of Sgs Web. So obviously you guys are still hashing out all the details for the 8th edition. So while we wait for that proposal to be completed, we're going to start looking at the technology and architecture for the rebuild. So one of the things we're going to start doing is trying to test out some of the technology that we plan to use for the rebuild by focusing on revamping the data management module in Sgs Web. So that module is used just to maintain configuration data, really. So the list of offenses in Sgs Web that are available with their OGS values, with their statutory limits, stuff like that. That's what that module is used for. So it's primarily used by our staff. And so if we revamp it and make changes to it, we're mostly just affecting our people and not the end users while we test things out. So we've started working on that. Other unit efforts, Matt just showed you the website, so we've been working with them and the liberal arts IT staff on that. We'll also be supporting the replacement of our SAS BI, our online data analytics tools. That project is kind of stalled while we build the research and data analysis manager position, but now that Brett is in that role, and once he's ready, we can start talking about that again. And then the last thing I'll mention is Sds Web Usage. So through the end of July, we've had 24,000 sentences submitted with 2021 dates of sentence. That is down. Like I was comparing it to the numbers last year, which were more close to like 40,000 sentences at this time. So that is pretty down significantly. And as always, if you want to see the breakdown of that number by county, the sentences submitted report is in the supplemental material which we're sent out. That's it. Any questions?
Sounds great. Thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, next up is Brett, right?
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to start by giving another quick little update on the staffing. So, as I mentioned earlier, we've hired Chris Marini as a new data analyst. However, we're still too short of our full complement of 4 data analysts. So we're actually hoping to interview next week for one of those positions. As Mark mentioned earlier, if you know of any candidates for analysts, reach out to us. We really do mean that. So if anyone knows anyone that might be interested, please have them reach out to us or apply through the Penn State website. In terms of data requests, over the last 3 months, we've been pretty busy with external researchers looking to use our data for their work. We've had 8 requests for just raw data sets, but in addition to that, we've had 12 requests for a little more extensive data reports and custom analysis. So let's take a little bit more time, more effort, but we continue to have a lot of interest in our data across the Commonwealth, but also across the U.S. from a lot of different universities, including in Pennsylvania, Duquesne, Pitt, CMU, Villanova, Penn State, you name it. And as Christy mentioned, we do have the Stats BI portal where users can come in and create custom reports on our website. As Mark mentioned yesterday, that data is actually a little bit out of date at this point. We've lost the ability to basically add new data. So despite the fact that data is 2 years old, we do get a lot of external users that come onto the website and extract those custom reports. In fact, we've had over 100 users just in the last 3 months. One focus area that we're going to be looking at over the next 3 months is our data management plan. So we've got a pretty extensive plan that we wrote probably 5 or 6 years ago. A lot of that still applies, but through the pandemic, working remotely, it sort of raised some new issues in terms of data security, and maybe where we might need to put together some new policies for data sharing and working remotely and those types of things. So we're hoping to have a new data management plan in place before the end of the year. And then I'll just touch quickly on some of our research projects. So last December, I presented to you guys the initial population projection simulation models. We've been continuing to update those with fresh data. COVID has sort of thrown a bit of a wrench into updating those models, as the 2020 data is somewhat incomplete and somewhat different than the years prior. So it's hard to use that as the source for models that are based on historical data. But we are continuing to work on building out those models. Matt presented earlier on the initial results of the risk assessments. It's still a little early at this point to comment too much on the effectiveness of the assessments. But I think the really encouraging sign is that risk scores are distributed very similarly to the test data samples from 2004 to 2006. So it's encouraging to see that the rules that were put in place based on sentences from 15 years ago are still holding constant today. One of our postdoctoral scholars, Miranda Galvin, has been involved in some interesting research in conjunction with Penn State. She's working on actually 2 separate areas of research. One is on consecutive and concurrent sentencing in Pennsylvania, and the other is on the consequences of juvenile prior records. And some of the preliminary findings of that research are really interesting and potentially enlightening for the commission, including the fact that just the mere presence of a juvenile prior record tends to be very predictive of a future risk of recidivism. But we also find that those who have a juvenile record tend to get hit a little bit harder on the sentencing side. And that's an effect that stays with them throughout their adult life. And then as we get up to the end of the year here, we also want to focus on looking at an analysis of firearms offenses in Pennsylvania, somewhat related to House Resolution 111, but also just a general look at firearm offenses in Pennsylvania, and how they relate to violence and other offense types, and what that prosecution and sentencing looks like. And one final project is just looking at COVID-19, the effect that the pandemic has had on sentencing in the courts in Pennsylvania. Along with many other research projects, we're staying very, very busy. But, I think that's all I have.
Great, thanks, Brett. Any questions for Brett? All right, thanks, Brett.
Thanks. Congratulations. Great job, Brett. All right, moving on to Ryan.
Good morning again, by 1 minute.
By 1 minute.
As brief as I usually do, considering everybody's time. There's a lot on the screen, but I thought I'd just orient you first to, if you're looking at the highlights, the education and outreach information is page 28 through 32. I'll cover that briefly here in a moment. And if you're, really want the details, you can go to the supplements, and we're 25 through 118. So there's a lot of detail in there, and I will spare you that here now this afternoon. The first thing I wanted to talk about was this effort around reporting. You've heard Mark and I talk about this a lot over the past probably year and a half or more. And, I don't mean to be redundant, although I guess I do, in that this is a really important initiative for the commission. And this unit, the Education Outreach Unit, has a large responsibility in communicating and assisting counties in this effort. And so one of the things that I see as manager of it and have communicated to the staff is that I'm confident that we can get all of the counties to that threshold, but it requires our constant communication with these counties. And one of the things that I'll talk about here briefly is the work that we try to do every day with all counties, but particularly those that are, below the threshold of 85%, really focusing with them, even if they don't want to continue to hear from us each time. We really want to make sure that we're in a position at the end of the year, if a county isn't meeting the threshold, that we've at least done what we can do with them to push them across, because we really don't want to see any county there. And it gets to, the enabling legislation and the role of the commission and us having to support that statewide clearinghouse and collecting of sentencing information. So better information for you as members to make the decisions around things like 8th edition guidelines and so forth. So one of the things I just thought I'd mention about the reporting effort was back in July, we sent some information to counties for a 2021 interim report. And so we focused on convictions with sentences from January through the end of May. And what we found was that about 26 counties were below the threshold. And I think what's important here is just to highlight that some of the reasons why we believe that to be the case. And we've talked a lot today about the impact of COVID. In March of 2020, it's actually kind of odd. I was thinking this is the first in-person update that we've provided to members since March of 2020. COVID certainly had an impact, early in 2020, but it's continued to have an impact on county practices. In talking with counties, there's staffing issues. And for those that are smaller counties and even larger counties, it's not a lot of individuals in these counties that are the actual people entering the information into Sgs Web. And so we've heard from a number of the counties that they've just been impacted. And so we're working with them to try to support them in getting that information in. Some of the other parts that you've heard me talk about are just process changes. And I don't want to call anybody out, but we've been working closely with Dauphin County, and they're going through a process change. And what happens is there's some lag. You're bringing new people into a system that haven't used it. And so just getting them into Sgs Web, getting access to JNet and then Sgs Web, and then training those individuals up on the application. And we're really focused and working with, Dauphin and other counties as well. Philadelphia is another one that we've been working closely with, and we're seeing a shift in, offices responsible for both the generation of guidelines on the front end, so the court can see the recommendations, but as equally important as the reporting of the sentences on the back end. So those are, two big reasons that we've seen. Some lesser, but I think also important reasons to recognize are just the education, and that's the responsibility of me and the unit to make sure counties are aware that they have to be reporting this information. And you might think that they should know, but we found that some don't. But I think we've been doing a lot of work over the last year and a half plus to make sure counties are aware of that. And then probably to a lesser degree, but worth acknowledging, is some counties don't receive county intermediate punishment funding. And so the teeth that we have here in reporting in a large aspect is the potential of not receiving that funding. And so we have seen some connection with some counties that don't receive IP funding and their percentages of reporting. But nonetheless, we work with them to get their reporting percentages up. So I just wanted to spend a moment there, and that'll be the longest that I talk about any one of the things today. But just wanted to raise all of that.
Yeah, if I could just raise, on that point about the reporting and the issue of those counties that don't receive county IP funding, I think that's one of the things in the in Act 114, the one JRI bill about funding, that we've been persistent on in terms of certification of compliance and full reporting, in part deal with CIP funding. But they also are supposed to be used by PCCD to determine the funding formula for what was called grant and aid before. So it's really important for PCCD, it's their call on how they use that information, but it's really important that we provide that information to PCCD, because we shouldn't have counties underreporting thinking there's no consequence, because missing data impacts all the work we're trying to do. So, and it's a public safety issue too. So, people should be fingerprinted, people should report sentences to us, we should have all that stuff in place. And this is one of those tools to encourage best practices. So although CIP is like the biggest tool, I think, us partnering with PCCD and trying to have a system in place where we're reporting information to them and they make a decision about how to use that, how to promote better practices is important, and maybe particularly important for those counties that don't get CIP funding. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. And that'll lead me to my wrap up, and just to say that, we have multiple efforts here from an outreach standpoint to work with these counties. And I'll just give an example. I guess it was last month now. I was in Chester County and met with, their president judge, I think they call it their criminal court judge liaison, district attorney, and their chief probation officer to discuss through issues, both from a process standpoint and promoting best practices. And then other issues, as Mark just raised, like, we require SID to be a field in Sgs Web to submit a sentence. And if a person's not fingerprinted, they might not have an SID. Certainly, if they've been fingerprinted before, we can find it. But, that's a process that we work with counties to remind them. And then lastly, what Mark mentioned, and I just use Chester as an example because it was a really fruitful discussion and we've seen some movement out of it. But just raising that, while it certainly could impact CIP funding up front, I mean, if you read the statute, we see that, it's a factor in the whole sort of funding formula. So thank you for that. The last few things I'll just highlight. Christy mentioned all the Sgs Web support, so thank you for mentioning that. I don't need to say anything further. Matt mentioned the monthly updates and the YouTube videos and, the website work, so thank you, Matt, for that. I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize two of the Education and Outreach Committee members here and our chair, Judge Marsico. So thank you both for your participation in that committee. It's really helpful for us to bounce ideas off of you and also get your guidance as we work through the guideline policies. And I apologize for that OGS email, but there you go. You got it anyway. There's a whole bunch of detail about education outreach activities and metrics and so forth. I won't go into any detail. Just a takeaway would be that I think we're staying busy and engaged with the counties. And then the last thing I'll mention before I open up if there's any questions for me, we provided 3 recent appellate opinions that are sentencing and or resentencing related. So you'll see in your supplementals, and it's probably why there's so many pages, is Commonwealth v. Coger, Simmons, and Williams. And in short, they deal with conditions of probation, generally at the time of sentencing and ordering those conditions, and the impact of as if they're not ordered, and what the remedy would be for the court when things don't go well. We saw the Simmons opinion talking about the presumptive revocation of consecutive periods of probation. The court's long-standing practice of revoking a probation that has not started. And then the last thing was SIP, and the recent decision around not being able to revoke failures of SIP. So that's information for you. If you didn't know about it, now you have it. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, Ryan, this is Judge Tucker. I have a couple questions. When you meet with these various counties that you mentioned, are you meeting with customarily, is it just judges? Is it the court administrator? Just the president judge? Or who do you meet with?
Sure, thanks. The Chester County example that I gave, I met with the president judge, a criminal court judge, the district attorney, their first district attorney, their chief probation officer, as well as some supervisors in that office. And those were really all the decision makers in Chester County, as an example, dealing with the guidelines and Sgs Web. In other counties like Dauphin, we've been meeting closely with their court administration because they're taking on a role of reporting the sentences on the back end. Judge, I've had meetings with the district attorney's office in Philadelphia about using Sgs Web upfront, which is a big move for us and for Philadelphia, and also meeting with, I think, the new supervising judge in Philadelphia, Judge Clemens. If I have the name wrong, I apologize. But I've had conversations I've had conversations with other individuals within Philadelphia as well. So it's really, county specific on who's responsible for the use of Sgs Web, both on the front end and on the back end.
Is it too early to tell from the people that you've met with in these various counties whether or not they're being responsive in terms of reporting?
Well, I think they're being responsive to the information that we sent them, and recognizing that they're at a low threshold. We have seen, I can't give you the number and I apologize, but we have seen for a number of those 26 counties, contacts from individuals responsible saying, hey, can you rerun the report for us? We've been working on entering the information. Or, hey, we believe we've entered all of the information in, and we've been working, on a county by county basis to rerun the information so that they can have an up-to-date for the first 5 months of the year. And one of the things that we'll be working on, and I'll say it because it's important that we do it, we'll be working on another report at some point, so that we can keep communicating with the counties, so that we don't end up, at the end of the road and with a whole bunch of work to do. We want to keep giving them information as soon as we can so that they have it. And the last thing I'll mention, Christy and I have talked a lot about this, is developing a report within Sgs Web so that users of Sgs Web can run that information whenever they want, however often. If they want to do it daily, then they could, monitor their cases on their own.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions, Brian?
All right, not as brief as I know. There you go.
Thanks, Brian. All right, next up is Diane.
Hello. On page 119 in the supplemental is where this information begins. Start with 3 pieces of legislation that were enacted. Act 48 creates a new offense of financial exploitation of older adults or care-dependent persons. The description is on page 121. The act itself is on 122. The grading is based on the financial amount or the course of conduct. Act 49 expands the offense of abuse of a care-dependent person. It adds the intent to harass by ridicule or demeaning a person using photos, videos. It's an M3 and the omnibus applied. That's on page 126 for the description and 127 for the act. The last one, Act 53, it's a little messy. This is child pornography 1863-12. We currently have an enhancement in place for under age of 13 and indecent conduct, nature of the abuse depicted, and then number of images. So this piece of legislation changes the age to younger than 10 or determination of prepubescence. So we modified our offenses in OGS to under 10, prepubescence, 10 to less than 13, and then 13 to less than 18. The act also requires enhancement if the child is known to the offender. And we decided to wait till the 8th edition to incorporate that. It also creates a task force to look for additions in the law that might need to be addressed. And Mark would be a member of that task force. Next, we spent a lot of time talking about the 8th edition. I know I've spent a lot of weeks, months swimming, some days drowning in data analysis and medians. We talked about the pretrial domestic violence assessment and putting that on hold or pause for a little bit. The certification of a compliance, Ryan discussed that. We looked at the AOPC reported convictions from January through May, compared that to sentences reported January through June, looked for unique OTNs, and then figured out what was reported to AOPC, what was reported to us, and then provided the OTNs for what was missing to each county. Yesterday, we talked about the state parole guidelines. We want to wait till the implementation of a strong R and then take a look at what we're recommending for the guidelines and see if we need to make any changes. We want to tweak the recommitment ranges based on the hearings and some feedback we got. We'll probably go back on public hearings for both of those things. On page 140, we have a list of the legislation that's passed one chamber. On 141 is the start of the HR 11 resolution. And the publication for the bulletin is on page 147. I think that's it.
Hey, thanks, Diane. I did want to pick up on one of the points that you raised, and it has to do with the recently enacted legislation. Our habit in the past, for the past decade, I guess, has been that we want to be really responsive to the General Assembly when legislation is enacted, and especially enhancements, that we act quickly on it and we have revised guidelines in place the following year. But, that got us in that habit of every year doing an amendment to the guidelines and sort of taking attention away from the big project, which was the 8th edition guidelines. So at this point, we're going to sort of rest on the current guidelines and the omnibus score to manage new stuff coming. And we're going to really focus on moving these 8th edition guidelines. And we will incorporate any of this into the 8th edition guidelines, but we can't be doing yet another amendment while we're trying to do a rebuild. So I just wanted to make that really clear that that's sort of the strategy moving forward. So it's all about 8th edition guidelines. The other thing, and this gets to the one bill or the one act that Diane talked about, it was an amendment to an enhancement we already have and an amendment to the statute that changes some of the grade provisions. And as much time as we've spent on modifying our omnibus policy, with just about every amendment to the guidelines, there's still gaps. And the General Assembly found one of those gaps in terms of just the way that the statute was amended, not quite fitting things we were thinking about with our omnibus policy. So we have spent a lot of time as staff really trying to pour through the original guidelines that we had, the omnibus policies that we have, and the amendment that was approved by the General Assembly to sort of make sure that we're applying the rules correctly in terms of what's the default OGS assignment for these offenses. And we think we got it right, but there's a couple of close calls. And so we hear Professor Missick in our head talking about the law of lenity in terms of benefit of the doubt to the defendant. And then we look at other things and think, well, that looks like it fits that higher penalty. So there's a couple of judgment calls. So I just point that out because Ryan's unit works a lot in trying to kick these things around, talking to people in the field and so forth. But he's also relying on his oversight committee, the committee that looks at education outreach with Judge Marsa co-chairing that, to take a look at it as well, to make sure that whatever staff is providing to practitioners as far as what our take on it is consistent with that review by some of the commission members. And again, the final determination is the court's determination, and we recognize that. But when it gets to, well, what is the OGS assignment based on your rules, we should be giving some guidance. And when it's not clear, we go to the committee or to the full commission just to try to get some clarity on that. So just wanted to let you know about that process, and that we appreciate all the contributions in looking at this. You know, we're going to have to rely on this process until we have new guidelines. So thanks. Hey, Diane, did you have anything else?
No, just an apology that I'm not there in person. I planned B. I did some last minute data analysis yesterday. And while I'm a really good multitasker, driving and working on a computer is not one of them.
Data analysis. Well, I guess you have to make that call on your own, but no, that sounds like the right decision. Just as long as, you know, you have a lot of water in that area of the state. So
Yes.
yeah, as long as you don't have that to deal with while you're there. Okay, thanks. The final issue that we talked about at the policy meeting was the scheduling of the next meeting to continue the review of the 8th edition guidelines. And as we stated then, what we'll ask Kathy to do is check in with everyone about their availability for a full day of meetings on that on the 8th of December, which is a Wednesday, the day before our next commission meeting. It would be in Harrisburg. We'll determine the location closer to, well, as soon as we figure out what's available, I guess. And we'll do it hybrid. So in addition to being in the room there, you can also participate by Zoom webinar. If we find out that date's not going to work, we'll check into other dates and check to find a date that works for as many people as possible. But we want to keep this thing moving along. The other thing that's under a miscellaneous provision was just the calendar for next year. We talked about this a little bit yesterday about it sounds like there's support to keep the same sort of process in place, that we generally speaking will have we'll have meetings, but there'll be hybrid meetings. We'll plan to do a Wednesday evening dinner meeting, Thursday morning policy meeting, Thursday 11 o'clock quarterly meeting. And we'll reserve Wednesday afternoon for either policy meetings or public hearings or other things like that if we have the need for that. So we've already taken the need for that for December, but thinking of next year, we'll take that same approach. The plan is to have quarterly meetings, so we'll look at, and I'll ask Kathy to do this, to look at the first and second week of March, June, September, and December, find some dates, get sort of a survey out to all of you to try to find availability and what date works out best. Sometimes it's the first week, sometimes it's the second week. And so we'll try to just sort of get consensus around that before the next meeting. So at the December meeting, you can vote on it, and then we'll publish it the start of the year so that we'll have the schedule moving forward. I'll also ask her, and I think in your materials, you'll find that aside from the calendar, there's also the listing of holidays. So we'll try to work around any of the holidays as we're planning that schedule for next year. And then the final thing I have is just a recognition that based on our discussions yesterday, there's a possibility that we'll have a lot of public hearings next year for sentencing guidelines, for resentencing guidelines, parole and recommitment ranges. So those Wednesdays before the commission meeting may be prime locations or prime times to have public hearings. But we also discussed thinking about how we either use public hearings or our commission meetings as ways to maybe get out to counties or other locations other than our traditional locations. So if you have any suggestions, if you want to welcome the commission into your county for a meeting, if it's helpful to loop in meetings with Board of Judges or with key officials from the county as part of that, I think it's a great opportunity just to sort of talk about guidelines and about the work that we're doing. So feel free to pass any of those suggestions on to us. I'll discuss it with the chair and vice chair, and we'll try to plan that into the process next year. But I think it could be really helpful. So with that, I'll turn it back to the chair.
All right, I think, that's it, right? We've nothing
I
else.
think that's it. But it's a shame to end so soon, but yeah, I think that's it.
All right. Anybody else have any other business they wanted to raise or discuss? All right, is there a motion to adjourn? All right, taken by Judge Barnstein? Sounds good. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. We stand adjourned. See you in
Thank you all. See you in December.
Thank you.